education, those test scores, those graduation rates. And so that's what they're doing. But unfortunately, what we've set up as a system, since we were, the state of California was found to be under special condition, which is like the lowest level of compliance about 10 years ago, into what we have right now is a model of compliance monitoring. But we've expended all our resources to get to that point. And it's going to be a challenge for us as a State Department and school districts to change from compliance monitoring to how are we going to improve those outcomes and focusing on that. That, on the other hand, presents us with an opportunity to focus in, on the students' needs of special education students. And for the outcomes, just all you have to do is talk to your school district people and find out who's in program improvement. And often those districts in program improvement are there because of the result of students with special education needs not necessarily meeting those targets. And so this is going to present us with the opportunities to repair that and hopefully get to a point where those outcomes are actually improving. So that's a challenge, and that's also an opportunity. Something else that poses, in fact, that's where I'm supposed to be today, over monitoring a large charter management organization, and it's trying to see how are they complying with a special education laws and regulation. But charter schools is a growing opportunity for students with special education, and yet it presents some challenges too, because charters get to waive a lot of laws. They don't have to meet a lot of the requirements that other schools do. But a lot of charter schools do not realize that students with special education needs retain all their rights. And so it really presents, we often get phone calls, for instance, from charter parents or parents that are interested in enrolling their students in a charter school, and they're told, well, we don't serve your student here. Or, well, you need to go back to your district and be served by those students. Now, there's the flip side of the coin. We have some exceptional programs that are in charter schools. I don't know of any special education charter schools, but charter schools that reach out to serve special education students and do a great job and do the things that all schools should be doing. So, but there's a difference. What Congress has done is set up a difference of how students are perceived in charter schools, and it presents a challenge for charter schools, for parents, for school districts to understand the rights and how those rights can be retained for students. We have charter schools that are school districts of the district. They're just like any other school, okay? So students have a right to go there at that charter school. But on the other hand, the school district can say, we have a program that meets your needs at this school, okay? We can better serve your child over at this school. And that school district has that right. It's a school district that has a charter school that is a school, just like any other school. Now, Congress set something up a little bit different that presents a huge challenge for the charter schools, for us as a State Department, and also for parents. And one of those things is that a charter school can basically say, I'm a school district, but only for the purposes of special education. In other words, they have to provide the full continuum of special education services. Okay, sure. Well, but anyways, it presents a challenge that those school districts have to provide a full continuum. I'm going to go fast. I was just given the sign here. So, but that is presenting a problem and how those students are served. Now, if you're interested in this, I invite you to go this is a website, and I'll give you another phone number that you can call to get that website. One thing that I want to highlight is when dealing with charter schools, you have an exceptional group or cadre of people in this area that have presented a model. Ron Powell in Desert Mountain has set up a nice model for how SELPAs can serve charter schools and special education students. So I invite you to contact him. Another issue for us at the State Department that we've been talking a lot about and have been having ongoing conversation is mental health. AB 3632 was vetoed by Governor Schwarzenegger, and then a subsequent bill, AB 114, changed the responsibility for mental health services back to the PL 94-142 days, where California had pulled it out and placed it in the county office. In fact, the county office would tell the IEP team what was supposed to happen with a student. Well, how are those students meeting those needs? And Joanne Riley has set up a nice program, for instance, again in your SELPA here, that is exceptional as far as reaching out and serving those kids without the resources of the county mental health. I'm sorry I'm going so quickly. Funding. Funding is a big issue that we're talking about, and it might be something, because I was talking to Ron, and he was a little bit surprised about this. It's a big concern. We're so involved here in California with our funding crisis, but a new crisis is on the horizon for us. Congress, in trying to deal with the deficit and deal with taxes, etc., put in a little budget bill that says basically come January 1st, 2013, there's going to be an across-the-board cut. So we've been dealing with cuts here in California. Well, a federal cut might be on its way unless Congress does something, and that includes special education funding. And, let's see, one more other challenge is transition. Transition is an ongoing concern. We've talked and talked and talked. We have students that are in high school that need services to ensure their success in the adult world. And that's a mandate from Congress for us to deal with. And for instance, when in working in compliance monitoring for so long, that's what we find is one of the most frequently non-compliant issue is transition. But your SELPA people and your county office people in this area have lots of resources. Riverside County, Sue Ball, Gail Angus have done some nice things with transition, so I'm sure they would invite you to contact them. Let me just put one other thing up. And I'm sorry I'm having to go so quick, but this is our procedural safeguards and referral service. If you have any questions or concerns about some of the topics that I mentioned briefly, obviously, I would invite you to call, and they will get you the resources that you need. Okay? Thank you.
Our next state panel presenter is Barbara Schulman. She's the chair for the Special Education Committee for the California Teachers Association. Barbara Schulman is currently a special education instructor in the Saddleback Valley Unified School District, holds an MS degree in moderate and severe education. Barbara's classroom experience began in 1973 as a teacher working with students labeled trainable mentally in the Chicago public schools. At the present time, Barbara coordinates the Functionally Unique Training, Utilization, Resources, and Employment in Society, Futures program, which is a program that is designed to further the growth of adult-age students in areas that enhance their independence and quality of life through the development of employment skills. Barbara is currently the chairperson of the California Teachers Association Special Education Committee. For over 39 years, Barbara's vast experience in special education has resulted in her being a dedicated professional educator working with and advocating for teachers and students with special needs of all ages. Please welcome Barbara Schulman.
gentleman, the wizard in the back, is going to do my presentation because I have no idea how to do it. If he can, but maybe not. There we are. Special Ed in California. I'd like to think of you and me as the bottom hand and a child as the top hand. When I started in 1973, I actually went to institutions in Chicago and took students out to bring them to public education. We've come a long way since then. Right, there's 10,000 schools in California, and we do service till 22, even though federal says 21. We in California do service till 22. And it's really important what we're doing, and I was never under the assumption that you should ever take a no as an answer. You just always go forward and you push, push, push. I'm going to try, and because I know we're in a hurry, I'm going to skip over the next 4 slides, which is a little poem that talks about that students are, right there, we'll stop, that students are different puzzle pieces and that you need to put them together to make who they are. And we as teachers need to build the outside and then build the inside. But you've got to have the whole child. And so you have to put all of those puzzle pieces together. I'm so sorry. We were talking about the modified assessment, and some people go, oh, if you give modified assessment, that's dumbing everything down. But it isn't. It has helped our students in special ed pass classes, pass tests, and have them be part of what everybody else does. One of my biggest pet peeves that I'd like to mention here is that it's really important we use person-first language. We don't say that special ed kid. We say the student with a disability, or the young man has autism. You have so many people who say, oh, the autistic kid. You know, let's put the person first and not the disability first. So that's something that I would like to tell everybody out here. I know you're all in the field, but it's something that we just so typically do. And if you can start to change the habit, it took me a while. I'm not going to tell you it didn't, because I'm old school, it's, 1973. But it's really important to do that. We must put the student first. Okay, next slide. In CTA, we did, in 3 months, a survey where we surveyed all teachers, general education teachers and special education teachers, with many questions. And the most amazing was that over 60% of our answers came from general education teachers. And that's because general education teachers are not general education teachers anymore. They are special education teachers. There is not a class, I don't believe, in the entire United States where there aren't some students with disabilities in the general education class. So when this survey came up, they just pounced on it. Some of our concerns are that special education students were moved into general education classes without adequate training for general education staff. Somebody was talking about it before. Now even special educators are going back for added authorizations in autism. The truth is, everybody has to be trained. Everybody has students with special needs. Students in special education are not receiving services needed to be successful. That's a problem with the budget, because whether we're talking about encroachment or where the money is coming from, there just isn't money. And right now, special education teachers in the state of California have been told, don't put those extra services on. Don't do 2 days of speech. Don't do that. Don't do adaptive PE. They can get physical therapy somewhere else. And they're asking us as teachers not to fulfill what an IEP needs. There is no longer an I in IEP. It is, as the gentleman said this morning, just goals of curriculum. That is, you can tell how emotional I'm getting. That is not what an IEP is about. An IEP is about that individual student and what they need to become a complete person. If we can turn the slide, please. It goes piece by piece, I think. I'm not good at this stuff. There are reality challenges and opportunities. The first reality, thank you, is increase in inclusive practices. The problem is there is a lack of training, there's a lack of time, and there's a lack of funds. On the other hand, there are wonderful opportunities for the students in inclusive environments, but there has to be more professional development. Oh yeah, we're getting back to money. Okay, let's go back up to the next one. The reduction of special education programs and services. They're asking us to take things away. There are counties, you're not going to believe this, there are counties that no longer have SDC special day classes or RSP, resource specialist classes. They're all gone. Everybody is fully included because that way we don't have to spend money. This is wrong. We cannot do that. We cannot make every RSP teacher an SAI teacher now, which stands for Specialized Academic Instruction, so that we don't have a 28 caseload. We're mushing everything up here, guys. We have to have teachers that are qualified. And I know that some people feel that special ed teachers aren't the only ones qualified, and I agree with that. But the general education teachers have no training. There is no money. There is no professional development. We've got to be able to work together. So we have to connect with educators and strategically plan how to do this, general educators and special educators. And then the last one we found from the survey was that no one's prepared for transitions, whether it's kindergarten to first grade or 7th grade to 8th grade to high school or after high school to adult transition programs. This is where the parents come in. This is where that part of the IEP, the individualized plan, is parents are involved also. You need to help them understand what a transition is so that it can move easier. We can't live in a bubble. We have to work with everybody, because when you work with everybody, it becomes a really positive situation. If you really talk to parents and you really talk to the students, they get it. They get it, but the time just isn't there. So we need to provide training for all stakeholders. Our parents need to understand what it means to go to a high school, what kind of classes their students are going to be in, what's going on. Somebody talked about bullying. You know, how can you help your child through this situation? We've got to have more communication. And on your tables, there's a little bookmark, hopefully. I don't know. And I hope I got to everybody. And there we have a information and professional development link. And on it, we have all sorts of information for you to go to and see what we have. And then the next one is a little video. Hopefully it'll work. Maybe it won't. Oh,
Some people like to climb mountains. I like to build planes in the air. I grew up wanting to build a plane, wanting to be up this high. Sometimes the temperature up at altitude will reach 60 below. It's crisp, it's refreshing. You never know what you're going to come across up there. Million geese, mallards, owls. These people back here, that's why I come to work. That's why I build airplanes in the sky.
We're not just building a plane here. We're building a dream.
I love this job.
We got a lot of banks up here. When I look over there and I see that little kid, I look in his eyes, that's all the things I need.
In a sense, that's what we do. We don't have a runway anymore. When I started in '73, there was a runway. We knew exactly where we were going. But we don't have that anymore. But we as teachers, it doesn't matter if it's 60 degrees below. We're out there, we're pushing, we're doing, we're working with our SELPAs, we're working with our special ed directors, we're working with everybody to do what is right for students. So it doesn't matter, we're still out there. And my last quote is from Hans Asperger, and it says, exceptional human beings must be given exceptional educational treatment that takes into account their special difficulties. Further, we can show that despite abnormality, human beings can fulfill their social roles within the community, especially if they find understanding, love, and guidance. And that is part of what we do as teachers, is give them the guidance, the love, and the understandings, and help them meet their goals through their IEP. Thank you.
In the interest of time, if you have any questions for our state panel, what we can do is we can take your questions and we will forward them to both of them, and we will make sure that they get the answers back to email to you. So we want to thank both Dr. Morgan and Ms. Barbara Schulman for your presentation. I would like to welcome today From the Ontario Montclair School District, Maureen Mendoza, member of the Board of Trustees. Moving on to our local and regional panel presentations, our first presenter is Ronald Powell, Special Education Local Plan Area, Desert Mountain SELPA. The Desert Mountain Special Education Local Plan Area is a consortium of 26 local education agencies and the San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools. The SELPA covers the 20,627 square mile region within the area that extends from the mountains to the border of Arizona within the San Bernardino County. The purpose of the SELPA is to ensure that quality special education programs and services are available throughout the region to meet the individual needs of special education students. Please help me welcome Ronald Powell.
All right. Thank you very much. They already gave me the high sign. I've got 5 minutes to do 35 slides, so we're up for this. Besides that, about this time, everybody's thinking more about the bathroom than they are thinking about this presentation. So let's see what we can do. You know, in California, we have about 1 out of 10 students who qualify as students with disabilities. And if we take a careful look at that population, about 2/3 of them are students with mild disabilities. You have about 40% who fall in that category of learning disabled. You have another 25% who fall in the category of speech impaired. And then the rest of the 13 disabilities listed under federal law fall into that other 1/3 wedge. So SELPAs have the responsibility to ensure that districts within their region operate special education programs in a legally compliant manner. The responsibility of SELPAs is not to provide special education services, it's to oversee the provision of special education services. In our region, we have 15 school districts, but in San Bernardino County as a whole, you have 6 SELPAs. You have 3 individual SELPAs. You have Morongo Unified, you have San Bernardino Unified, and you have Fontana Unified. They're large enough on their own to be their own SELPAs. And then you have 3 multi-district SELPAs. You have East Valley SELPA that has 5 districts included in them. You have West End SELPA that has 11 districts included in them. And then you have Desert Mountain SELPA. We have 15 school districts in our region. We cover 20,627 square miles, and because San Bernardino County wasn't big enough for us, we went into Inyo County and also a little bit down into LA County as well. Now, we kind of lose track how large we are here in California. I think Dr. Gerber stated that we have, or maybe it was John who stated that we have something like 3 million students with disabilities in the nation. Well, over 600,000 of them are in California. That's 20%, folks, that are right here in California. And if you take a look at our geography, you know, our geography of San Bernardino County is larger than 9 New England states. In fact, we have more students enrolled in San Bernardino County, 3 times more students enrolled in San Bernardino County than the entire state of Montana. I have 70% of the entire state of Montana's special ed population in my SELPA alone, and I only serve 25% of the special ed population of all of San Bernardino County. So given the fact that Montana has 2 senators, I think we should get 6. Now, if we take a look then at demographics, going back again, I showed you earlier that California has about 2/3 of their students that have mild disabilities, learning disabilities, and speech impairments. Notice that that kind of brown wedge toward the top, 10%, that's the population of children who fall on the autism spectrum. And we have another 8% of the population who are other health impaired. Now, if I show you the demographics here in San Bernardino County, you can see we have a slightly larger population of children who are learning disabled, about the same in terms of speech impairment. The proportion of students compared with the state who fall on the autism spectrum is slightly lower, but the proportion of students, and this is the blue wedge, who have intellectual disabilities is slightly higher in our county versus the state. Now, if we compare 2006 to 2010, you can see that the size of those bars is just about the same, and that indeed is true. In fact, over that 5-year period, we have actually lost about 400 students with disabilities within San Bernardino County. But you can't see it in this slide unless you have really good eyes, and that is the constituency of those two bars have changed. Let me show it to you this way. We have gained almost 1,500 students who fall on the autism spectrum. And at the same time, we've lost nearly 2,000 students who fell in that category of learning disabilities. We've lost about 800 students who are speech impaired, but we've gained about 800 students who fall in the category of other health impaired. So in just a second, I'd like to zero in specifically on those areas of growth, because that has some unique meaning for us, because the overall responsibility for SELPAs is to provide a free, appropriate public education, and as soon as you say that, people think academics. Now, if we look at academics, we've actually done pretty good over the last 10-year period. You know, 10 years ago, when NCLB first passed, only 5% of students with disabilities were scoring at a level of proficient or advanced. And if you take a look at where we are now, the population of students with disabilities who are proficient or advanced is actually higher than where general ed started 10 years ago, if you track that straight across. So special ed is doing a good job in terms of academic improvement because the slopes are going up. That's the direction that we want them to go, is to go up. But everybody's failing when it comes to meeting the targets. That red line is the target that schools are supposed to face, or supposed to meet on an annual basis. And you can see that beginning in 2007, we started the balloon payment plan for No Child Left Behind, and the line has gone straight up, increasing 11% a year every year. It's impossible to meet that target, both for special ed as well as general ed. So what are the challenges and opportunities? Let's go back to this population of growth in students who fall on the autism spectrum. Now the green line is California's bar of growth for students who fall on the autism spectrum. The yellow line is San Bernardino County. Notice that we have fewer students who fall on the spectrum in San Bernardino County than they do in the state as a whole. But also notice that the slope is very similar. We're just a little bit behind, but we're growing at practically the same rate. Now, why is that a problem? Well, as it was pointed out before, children who fall on the spectrum are much more expensive to serve than children who are learning disabled or speech impaired. So if I take a look at that, you can see, now I know this is a lot of numbers, but we have actually grown by expense of about $10 million over the last 5-year period of time, and let me show it to you this way. The cost of serving children who fall on the autism spectrum has increased by $27 million in the last 5 years. The cost of serving children who are other health impaired has increased by $11 million. We've decreased in the cost of serving children who are learning disabled or children who are speech impaired. But the net impact is a $10 million increase in expense at the same time that funding has actually decreased in education. We are being asked to do more in special education and in general education as a whole, and that represents problems for us. Now let me show you another line. This is the line for growth in the population of other health impaired. Dr. Gerber asked the question, where have all those LD kids gone? We think we have part of the answer right here. Because in 1998, the federal law changed and they rolled ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, under the category of other health impaired. It is easier to qualify under the category of other health impaired than it is under the qualification criteria for a learning disability, because you don't have to have a significant discrepancy between ability and achievement. We have parents that come into schools with a prescription note from their doctor that says, this child has ADD, serve him in special ed. And school districts are relatively disarmed in terms of being able to deal with that kind of request. So you'll notice that at the time that the law changed, we had a significant advance in the population of children who fall into the category of other health impaired. We think that that can be traced back to the change in the law that put ADD kids into that category. Now, if that's true, you would expect that children with an attention deficit disorder would also be manifesting impulsive behaviors that would likely show up as being contrary to most rules in a school, which means I should be able to also see an increase in suspendable behaviors, so let's test that. Oh, by the way, here's a problem. Early intervention, you know, when things go out the window, they drop early intervention first. In the state of California, Governor Brown has proposed in his budget that we pit state preschool programs against transitional kindergartens. And the only way that state preschool programs will be able to survive is if transitional kindergartens go away. Well, both of those have to do with serving young children. We think that's the wrong direction to go because I'm going to show you some quick research on this. Research shows that about 10 to 15% of 3 to 4-year-olds have significant behavior problems that rise to the level. They're so significant that they're adversely impacting their ability to participate in schools. And if we don't deal with those early on, then the child has a 50-50 chance of persisting in those aberrant behaviors until the time they reach adolescence. And if we don't deal with that by the time they reach the age 9, buckle your seatbelts and ride it out because the chances of any successful intervention after age 9 have pretty much gone down the tubes. So here we have an educational program that is no longer putting the emphasis on serving kids early on to address those behaviors. Instead, we prefer to wait. And what do you think is going to happen? They're going to show up as being excluded in schools through suspensions. So we took a look. The red bar here is expressed as the numbers of suspensions per enrollment. So the way to interpret this is that in the state of California, you can expect about 12 suspendable offenses for every 100 kids that are enrolled in the school. Now in San Bernardino County, the rate is actually higher. It's up closer to 16 out of 100. Where does special ed fall? We're even higher than that. Now true, this rate of suspension has been coming down, and that's been because we're trying these extraordinary efforts to deal with the kids not only in an early intervention status, but also to be able to deal with them in terms of positive behavior interventions and supports, which John mentioned in his earlier statement. It's a research-proven strategy that we know works. And if you implement that, it works for about 80% of the population because you're giving them quick rules, you're teaching them what's expected in each environment, and then you're doing it for all students. It works for most kids when you do it that way. We implemented it in many schools throughout San Bernardino County, and look at the results. See the green bar? Had it drop down? That's because schools are finally beginning to implement school-wide positive behaviors, interventions, and supports. We're also implementing mental health services. Bob Morgan talked about how schools are taking that responsibility back. And when the state had the program, 50% of the kids they were serving were emotionally disturbed. But when we put it into schools, we're actually able to serve more kids in a broader sense, catch them early so we don't see those problems intervening in the school setting. So what are the challenges that we're seeing, to summarize? Demographics, economics, behavior, mental health, disruptive technology, because while computers and that kind of thing are cool, we don't have the bandwidth or the money to present it to children, and most of our teachers don't know how to use it, which ties in with teacher preparation and training.
Dr. Paul, I love your passion. Our next presenters, their team, we have Dr. Judy Silva, the Department of Educational Psychology and Counseling, Special Education, Credential and Master's Program here at Cal State University, San Bernardino. Ms. Silva has been involved in teacher preparation in the field of early childhood special education since 2002. She has held the current Pupil Personnel Services Credential in School Psychology since 1996 and has been working with families and children with special needs since that time. Dr. Silva has been working to provide access to services for families who have children with identified disabilities, as well as for families who have children considered at risk for school difficulties due to both environmental and biological factors. Her passion has been behavioral research in the fields of ECSE and teacher preparation as it relates to addressing challenging behavior, evidence-based practices, and implementing federal and state legislation for individuals with special needs. Our second speaker, Sherry Franklin Guy, PhD Assistant Professor, Department of Educational Psychology and Counseling, California State University, San Bernardino. Dr. Franklin Guy received her PhD in Communication Services and Disorders and is an assistant professor in the Department of Educational Psychology and Counseling here at Cal State University, San Bernardino, where she teaches assessment and evaluation practices to educational credential candidates. Her background is in communication sciences and disorders, as well as special education. Her research interests include written language disabilities and effective educational assessment practices. Please help me welcome Dr. Judy Silva and Dr. Sherry Franklin Guy.
Dr. Franklin Guy is not here today. She and I collaborated on this presentation, and she sends her regrets. We both find this to be such an incredible honor and such an incredible opportunity to have all of you in this room, and you have to listen to me for 5 minutes. I mean, it's almost as good as the classroom. And following Dr. Powell was super unfair. I don't even have close to that kind of charisma, so hopefully I can be clever. I don't have any good slides with statistics like some of the other presenters, but a couple of statistics I can present to you about the special education programs at Cal State San Bernardino is we are one of the main producers of special education or education specialist credentials in San Bernardino and Riverside County. Cal Baptist University in Riverside is one of our closest competitors as a regionally serving institution. And then National University, Azusa Pacific University, and Brandon all have wide-ranging programs, so we couldn't break down their numbers according to San Bernardino and Riverside County. Special education teacher preparation has been a little bit of a roller coaster based on a lot of the issues that we've already heard about this morning. The issues of serving kids with autism, particularly those in the mild to moderate range of disability, is sort of the impetus for what I'm going to talk about in our presentation today. Oh good, there's a button. I was a little worried about how this was going to move forward. Many of you might be familiar with the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. That's the state agency that pretty much we are the middleman for. The university and teacher preparation is the middleman between the Commission on Teacher Credentialing and the school districts. So we basically take the standards that the commission gives us and we train the teachers, and then the districts assign the teachers. And assignment of special education teachers has been big fun lately, right? It's been big fun, and so we're going to talk about two of those categories. Now, I think that where there was a challenge here in serving children with autism and in serving very young children with disabilities, there have definitely been inherent opportunities. The commission had to revise the special education credentialing process and programs, and so in 2006, they figured out that they were going to do it, and they assigned a work group. And you can read all the words and letters and stuff, sorry. The work group had to accomplish providing improved services to California students with disabilities. They also were charged with providing more opportunities for people to become special education teachers while reducing redundancy in preparation and streamlining the structure so that you didn't have to go back to the university, complete another whole entire credential from square one, and that you could look at your credentials as additive as you move forward, was the streamlining piece. And improving the skill level and retention rates among special education teachers. When you look at the numbers of projected hires for special education teachers, in some places those numbers are high year after year because of turnover, not because of growth. You know, there's a lot of turnover among special education teachers, and it just depends on the programs and where that turnover happens to be. And then also assisting local education agencies in meeting their need for qualified special education personnel. The need for personnel has driven a lot of the innovations and the programs that we've been trying to put together at the university level, at the Institutes of Higher Ed, IHEs. So IHE, is it okay if I use that term? Are you guys good with that? Okay, great. Some of the modifications that the work group had to consider were credential structure, subject matter competence, content performance expectations, and service delivery. And I think today we've talked about at least 2 of those 4 topics so far, right? All right. So what they came up with, in particular what I'm going to talk about, is a brand new credential structure. And Cal State San Bernardino's special education program has been in transition to this new credential structure. We're nearing the end. We're so happy. We have students in our classes that could potentially be in 4 different credentialing structures at any given moment in time. So we had to put the kibosh on peer advising, because what was right for one person was not the same for someone else. But now we're in our almost near the end of this transition to the new credential structure. The new credential structure is better. It really, really is better, because now our candidates can clear their credentials without having to pay more money to come back to the university for level 2. And candidates under the new structure clear their credentials through work experience and induction. And many school districts have, and many consortiums of school districts have been approved for education specialist induction programs, so that now candidates can clear their credentials with their district, as opposed to having to pay to come back to the university to do that. Special educators were the only ones who had to pay more money to clear their credential, and they weren't getting a lot of support from the state. So the new structure mirrors that of the multiple and single subject credentials. So some of the things they added, though, were added authorizations to the special education credentials. 2 added authorization areas that I'm going to highlight that we offer at Cal State San Bernardino are the added authorization for autism spectrum disorders and the added authorization for early childhood special education. Early childhood special education is birth to pre-K the way we define it. Birth to pre-K covers every possible disorder, all levels of functioning. Because in early childhood, why would you separate out mild to moderate from moderate severe? When children are very young in those early years of development, they are more alike their typical peers than they're going to be at any other time in their development. Why stigmatize them at that age? It doesn't really make any sense. We should be serving them and supporting their growth, learning, and development because we have the best shot of doing so at that time. And I think that's also something that's been said over and over and over again this morning. So the added authorizations were developed to allow some flexibilities to districts so that they didn't have to go back, a candidate wouldn't have to go back and get an entirely different credential just to serve a population of students in their setting. So we have the autism right here, and this is just, this is just the wording that the CTC actually puts on the credential authorization for the added authorization in autism. Added authorizations can be added to any education specialist credential. They can be added to intern credentials, they can be added to level 1 credentials, level 2 credentials, preliminary credentials, clear credentials. So they can be added to a really wide range, which does give employers a lot more flexibility with assignment. And they don't take that long to complete. At Cal State San Bernardino, our added authorization programs take 2 quarters or about 6 months to complete. It's just that you have to come in at the right time because we only offer the rotation once a year. So timing's important. But the added authorization for autism, you can see all of the things that we have to make sure our candidates can demonstrate by the time they leave our program. This is the wording for the early childhood. Gosh, I'm changing it on my tablet, but not on the button thing. The early childhood, this is a lot more words and letters on this one, but it covers a lot more territory, and actually it's been around for a long time. This was previously the early childhood special ed certificate that could be added to any clear ed specialist credential at the time. So what Cal State San Bernardino special education faculty, we roughly have between 300 and 400 candidates in any aspect of our special education programs at any given point in time. We have 7 tenure track full-time faculty and 1 full-time lecturer, and a couple of adjunct faculty, who rattle around a little bit taking care of business for us. And what we decided to do when we got all these work group recommendations was overhaul our program. And our guiding principles for overhauling our program were to provide access to our candidates to a comprehensive, high-quality preparation program. Sometimes people really complain about the program at Cal State San Bernardino because we hold their feet to the fire in their practical experiences. And it's really one thing to learn something in the classroom. It's really something entirely different to be able to apply that in the real world. And we push our candidates pretty hard in both our added authorization and our internship and student teaching programs to demonstrate the application of these complex skills. under real life conditions, not under ideal conditions, under regular world conditions, with very diverse classroom settings, diversity in terms of language, background, and disability and severity of disability, socioeconomic factors. All of those things add to the diversity of the classroom experience. We also wanted to keep the cost and the time commitment within reason for our candidates. We developed a system of tracks to give candidates options for how long it would take them to complete their credential programs. Track A is an intensive 1-year preliminary Ed Specials credential program, and it is intensive. I tell them at the beginning, you can't have a life. If you have kids, then find someone to take care of them. Preferably don't do this if you have kids. And you can't have any emergencies happen in your life for the next year. Just hold everything off for a year. It's a very intensive program, but we make it available. We also have a 4-quarter track, which is the more normal track many of our candidates take. 4 quarters is an academic year plus 1 quarter. And then we have a 2-year track that also parallels our internship track. So we wanted to keep the cost and the time commitment reasonable. We can't control cost very much. The state of California controls costs of the Cal State system, as you may know. And those costs seem to be rising continuously. We also, our third guiding principle was to focus on outcomes that address the state standards, because you know the state gave us revised standards too, which were better, I think, and also to respond to your needs, the needs of the local school districts that we serve. Now our service area, you saw Dr. Powell's map of San Bernardino County. Well, that's our service area, and all of Riverside County, all the way out to Blythe. Has anybody been to Blythe? I was there Monday. It's far away. 168 miles to be precise from Highland, California. All right, so those were our guiding principles in developing our programs. So, and these were the recommendations from the work group for what Ed Specialists need to know. And we took this really seriously. What do we need to teach our candidates? What outcomes do they need to have? Because at the institutional level in higher ed, we're focused on outcomes for our candidates because we expect our candidates, when they're teachers, to focus on outcomes for their students. We want them to be focused on what is it we're trying to teach kids, and then once we've identified what they need to learn, whatever that may be, functional skills, adaptive skills, academic skills, then let's choose evidence-based approaches to help them meet those outcomes. And let's, along the way, evaluate their progress, do progress monitoring. And that's what the work group basically said, that we need to understand service delivery, and with service delivery comes collaboration and communication skills. I was sitting at the table here and in other places too where people are like, yeah, we need to communicate and collaborate. That means that somebody needs to listen to what we say. And it's true, you have to be an awesome listener to be a communicator and a collaborator, but you also have to be able to play well with others, right? And that's what we have focused on in our program. So I'm going to skip ahead a couple slides here because I think I'm going to get the boot here in a minute. The Commission on Teacher Credentialing also gave us very specific standards on collaboration in the preparation of our candidates. And we take them very seriously. They are a main component of not only our classroom experiences and our added authorizations, they're also a main primary component in our practical experiences, the supervised experiences where the candidate gets to get feedback for doing it. And they hate that part because they have to talk to people. And they have to try to arrange times for doing that. And that's a huge challenge for teachers because there's no prep time, right? There's no prep time in special ed and there's no prep time in general ed. So arranging the time for communication and collaboration has been one of our main focal points, I think. The last thing I just want to say briefly is the underlying principle that drives all of this are ethics in special education. I use this article with my candidates in both the autism and the early childhood added authorization programs. And it's an article by William Heward that was published in 2003. And the name of the article is 10 Faulty Notions About Special Education. And he goes through, some of the issues and assumptions about special education, how sometimes it's looked at as a socio-political phenomenon. But what it boils down to is kids. And all of my work, both at the university and in the field where I get to interact with students and families, it's about the kids. Keyword's 3 recommendations were: 1, view special education as a profession. Only professions have codes of ethics. It's critically important for us to train our teachers to view what they do as a professional practice, and to not only know that a code of ethics exists, but also how to utilize those ethics. And one of our ethical obligations, as well as a legal obligation under IDEA and also under the No Child Left Behind, I'll just call it that because it's easier. One of our obligations under both of those is to collaborate and coordinate services for kids. So looking at special education as a profession is one of our recommendations we're trying to implement in our programs at Cal State San Bernardino. The second one is ask for the data and evaluate its believability. So when we're looking at what do we do to educate children with disabilities, ask for the data and evaluate the believability of the data. Evidence-based practices in teaching and learning. And then finally, his final recommendation was focus on alterable variables. We need to put our focus on the stuff we can change. There's a lot of stuff we can't change, but there's a lot of things in the classrooms that teachers can do, and there's lots of things at school sites that teachers, principals can do together. Those are the alterable variables. So the 3 recommendations: view special education as a profession, ask for the data and evaluate its believability, and focus on alterable variables are kind of the principles that are driving teacher preparation at Cal State San Bernardino. So, thanks.
Our last local and regional presenter this afternoon is Maureen Eckholt, Assistant Principal at Upland High School in the Upland Unified School District. Through a rigorous selection process based on a special education performance over 4 years, the California Comprehensive Center in Weston identified 8 unified school districts that showed unusually strong academic performance for their special education population compared to similar districts in California. Ultimately, WestEd selected 4 school districts for quantitative and qualitative data analysis. The Upland Unified School District was one of the 4 districts selected. Please help me welcome Maureen Eckholt.
Good afternoon, last speaker. Yay. And I will try and talk as fast as Dr. Powell, but I don't know if I can. Okay, so Upland Unified has seen double-digit growth in many of the grade levels. So, and that's been over the last 5 years, and although we certainly aren't meeting the bar set at the national level, the growth continues to move forward, so that's one thing we're proud of. And so we just wanted to go over real briefly kind of how we arrived at this and what we did. The discussion began at the high school level, and pretty much it started with what we didn't like. What did we see that wasn't working? CST scores were an area of concern, although rigor had been addressed district-wide. There were still way too many FBB scores, or far below basic scores, within the SDC population, and we knew we had to do something about it. There were also way too many levels within the high school. We had a low SDC class, a high SDC class, an RS class, an applied level class, which is non-E through G students, a prep level class, and an honors class. So our students were getting way too pigeonholed. The SDC and RS programs were also way too rigid. Students were placed into a program, and the IEP just wasn't individualized enough. And finally, in talking to colleges, we found that the feedback we were getting was the preparation wasn't realistic enough. We were babying our students and not preparing them sufficiently for the transition into the college. And differentiation and PLC, although we were talking about it, we weren't really doing it. Okay? So we decided to return to a focus to the IEP and less on the programs that were currently in place. And just take a look at some key questions. Does the student need a modified curriculum? And if so, provide a modified curriculum and don't worry about their label. Second, do they need accommodations? And if they do, make sure you provide those in every single environment within the school. Student placement, much more fluid, so students didn't have to be RS. They could be in an honors class for mathematics. They could be in a social skills class with their speech teacher, and they could also be in STC type of a class for English. We've also moved towards inclusion wherever possible. So the whole tone of the IEP meetings changed because it became less about earning your way into a general education class and more about let's start there, and if it's not working, get back down. And that conversation took place elementary, junior high, and high school. Staffing adjustment. So in that conversation, we realized that's a big challenge. It sounds nice, but how do you actually do that? The first area we looked at was collaboration. Collaboration needed to be much more focused. We focused on two primary types of collaboration: teacher-teacher, the co-teaching model, and also a teacher. And we did treat those separately, separate trainings and separate expectations within the classroom for those two models. We asked the special ed staff to specialize in the subject area. Part of this was driven by the Highly Qualified Initiative, but it's been very successful in that every teacher teaches their special ed subjects. So you'll be an algebra teacher and teach only special ed students that need a modified curriculum, but at the same time you are the collaborating teacher in algebra classroom within the general ed program. And what that is, the biggest payoff for that is it's increased the rigor, because if you're only teaching special ed pull-out all day, you kind of forget how high they have to get. And so it's just strengthen the PLCs and strengthen the school-wide conversation that's going on. Members of core department, so all special ed staff are primarily members of core department first, and then the special ed department second. So they kind of have a dual responsibility and just a lot more expertise within the subject area. You got the wrong one. And again. Obviously not technologically trained very well. Elementary schools as well started to make these same adjustments, and although they still have the RS and STC programs very differentiated, a lot more collaboration on those levels as well. RS teachers co-teach within the general ed classrooms in 4th through 6th grade on a regular basis, and small clusters of RS students who need extra support are pulled out. STC classes are virtually empty at the end of the day. Those students go out into the general ed classrooms for all their science and social studies instruction, so just a lot more inclusion. Overall, also just greatly increased social skills by our speech department. As our autism numbers increase, that just keeps going up. And that's a main focus within the speech classroom, but also for next year, the biggest thing for us is the training of general education teachers in this area. BSP training, or the positive behavior support training, big area of focus as well. As we've done more inclusion, we want to make sure students aren't excluded for behavioral reasons. So that training is taking place for both general ed and special education teachers. And teacher support, can't do this without teacher support. We're very fortunate. We have a very supportive district office that's provided us a lot of resources to do this. That's a lot of collaborative training, both at the district and the site level. So doing very specific hands-on kind of training to show people what a good collaborative looks like, what a modified test looks like, and going through those processes. Limiting the number of special education students in classes. So working together with our union leaders, we wanted to make sure we weren't overloading the general education teachers, and so making sure, for example, at a class of 37, no more than 10 special education students would be in that class. So it doesn't change the dynamic of the class, and having supportive staff within that. Honor working partnerships, as we move forward, we've been doing this for about 5 years. The partnerships that work, we try and make sure they'll stick together so they're not having to reinvent the wheel constantly. You know, a good working marriage is a good working marriage. You don't want to break it up. And to try and have common preps for them. And finally, connections with the EL. What we found is this program is kind of morphing into similar services for our EL population. So we're kind of working on that right now as well. I just wanted to click the right button. I don't know why. Yeah, that's okay. That's related. And finally, for the results, the biggest boost for us has been increased CST scores, double-digit growth in every grade level for the last 5 years, and single-digit growth in some areas. Much higher percentage of students in general education classes. At least 80% of special education students have at least one class in a course subject area before they graduate, which I think is great. And better preparation for college, a lot more students being successful in the community colleges by their own self-reporting. Biggest challenges, need for schedule changes mid-year. When you push general ed inclusion, you have to be ready to make changes if it's not working. So you have to have a very cooperative master schedule person. Difficulties in working partnerships. The marriages are great sometimes, but sometimes you have a lot of divorces. You've got to work that out. Not enough staffing and time. Everyone's talked about that, but it's ongoing. One of the pluses, though, of the financial crisis is we find our hiring pool is wonderful. We get the most wonderful people applying for jobs that we didn't have 10 years ago. So that's probably one of the few pluses. And finally, demands on special education staff. Our union is working on this quite a bit because we find we're asking our special education staff to do a lot more. They're now case carriers, teachers, collaborators. They're just doing too much, and we feel like we're stressing them out.
We'd like to thank all of our local and regional panel. And with closing remarks, the Honorable Congressman Joe Baca.
Well, thank you very much. Let's give Pat a round of applause. Thank you very much for being here. I'm going to try to keep it as short because I know that we've already gone into the lunch period, but I want to thank each and every one of the panelists. I think you did an outstanding job. Could all the panelists stand up? I have certificates for all of you, but we'll give them to you later on. Stand up and give them a round of applause. Thank you for taking the time from your busy schedule to come and educate us. Because this was an educational process for all of us and for those who attended right now. We got enlightened in reference to what we need to do and address many of the challenges that are still facing us as we look at special ed and the needs in that area and how we've got to change too as well. And there has to be changes amongst us both at the federal, the state level, and administrators and parents as well. And we all, as it was stated before, it's very important that we communicate. And then the communication becomes very important as we're to address the problems that are there. But we've also told ourselves that we've got to change in terms of our own attitude and behavior in dealing with the problem. If we don't change within our own attitudes, our own behavior, how can then we deal with the problems that are affecting us right now? Because you can get people that want to become teachers in special ed, but if they don't change attitudes and behavior and create an environment where it's positive, where kids can come and learn, and where parents feel that they can be actively involved in helping their child progress, we have to create those kind of environments in the schools. And Ron, thank you very much. I think you were very enthused, and I love that. You know, you did a terrific job. Give him a round of applause. Thank you very much, because we have to have that kind of enthusiasm. And it tells us that we've got a lot of work ahead of us. We need to continue to not only collaborate, but work together, both parents, counselors, teachers, administrators, to make sure we achieve our goal. Because ultimately our goal is to make sure that every child has an opportunity, regardless of special needs or not, is to fulfill their goals or their ambitions or their life, is so they can become productive citizens in our society. And that's basically our goal, if we can let them become productive individuals and learning and finding out how do we deal with the problems that we have. I know that we have a lot of challenges both from the federal, because the federal then has to look at how do we then provide the additional dollars, and then how do we then deal with some of the mandates that are there that stop the restrictions from doing what we should be doing as well. And that's why with No Child Left Behind, as I stated before, that becomes part of the problem. And how do you deal with special ed? And how do we get the additional monies? And how do we get monies also from the state to address those needs within our school districts, to give them the autonomy to do what's necessary? So we've got many, many challenges, and that's one of the ways we end up doing is to make sure we get elected bodies or people that put education as a high priority. At least that's the way I look at it, you know. Because, you know, you can do all that you want, but if you don't have the support from that level, then it becomes very difficult, and you trying to implement a lot of what needs to be done. And that's why school board members, and I appreciate many of the school board members that are here, Mo that's here, and then Leticia that's here too as well, and there's a couple of other school board members. And of course, you know, Pat, you know, herself is a school board member that has to look at some of the changes. Again, you know, I want to thank all of you, you know, for coming. I want to thank the educational committee and Jesse Venezuela. I want to give him personally a round of applause for coordinating. Jesse, stand up. This is Jesse Venezuela. Thank you very much. And the idea that this is the first time that we've done this came from Steve Figueroa. So I want to give him credit, because he says, Joe, why don't you look at education and have something done on special ed? And he's been involved a lot in the special ed area. And I says, all right, why don't we begin to have a conference? But I know that I want to continue to listen to ideas. And I know that there are many questions that have been submitted, and we haven't had an opportunity to respond to some of those that many of you would have loved to have seen, and hopefully that we can get back. But because of the shortness of time, we had to condense it. But I want to continue to listen to ideas in terms of what we need to do, and how do we address education now and in the future, and how do we address education in charter schools too as well, because both of them play an important part, and how do we marry both of them in making sure that we do the right things and are spending our dollars wisely too as well, and not taking so much money away, no offense, from the public schools. Even though public schools are there, we have a responsibility. Yet charter schools, to me, I look at it as somewhat of a private school in a sense. But how do we merge both of those and still do what is right, and continue to make sure that we provide the best quality of education for a lot of our students who choose either one of the two avenues that they decide to go, whether it's continue to be public schools, because remember, public schools are the ones that are open to all of us. I think we have the best public schools, and we have the best teachers in the areas. All we've got to do is allow them to become better. And if we allow them to become better, they will be better. And that's why we've had, in the past, when you look at dropout rates, you know, dropout rates weren't as high as they are now. And we have to question, why is our dropout rate increased now? And what have been the regulations or mandate that has changed that in comparison to what we did before? So we really have to examine and evaluate ourselves. Again, I want to thank you, all of you, for coming. I look forward to hearing from you in the future and listening to any ideas you may have of directions that I, as the congressman, need to take, or my staff that's here. So again, thank you very much.
We want to thank everyone for coming, and if we can have the presenters just come up front to receive your certificates.
Could each of the presenters that are here come up front?
Of course we will.
Exactly.